You speak about the Gospel of Judas, and you say that obviously his philosophy was wrong in the fact that he betrayed Jesus, and he believed that he needed to free him from his physical body. Now, why was Judas wrong and Luke, Matthew, the other apostles right? Just because they agreed? Is that the only reason why they were right?
The first century eyewitnesses of Christ insisted that they saw Judas betray Christ, that he went out and committed suicide because he was genuinely grieved over the wrong that he had done, and they insisted that Jesus taught that the physical is good. When Jesus rose from the dead, he physically appeared to Thomas and said, "Right here, take your hands and put them in the nail prints in my hands." The resurrection of Christ was not a spiritual resurrection. It was a physical resurrection.
And now all we have to as evidence for Christ's resurrection are the words of these people. These people who had a bond between them, a bond of friends, a bond of people with possibly the same political agenda. How can we necessarily trust people who are so closely connected?
Oh, it's real simple. Hypocrites and martyrs don't tend to occupy the same body. And if these guys were lying, if they claimed to have seen Christ risen from the dead, but in reality they hadn't, and they just put together a sophisticated lie, then they are flaming phonies, hypocrites. But then they went ahead and died for what they claimed to have seen, the dead Christ risen from the dead. Hypocrisy and martyrdom don't tend to go together.
During the Soviet era, many people believed that by building communism, they would, in effect, be creating a better future for the world. And communism, as you know, has no religious backgrounds. Some of these people actually died for what they believed in. Now, isn't this basically a proof that people can have a very strict belief in what is possibly politically good and have that belief be strong enough to die for it?
Absolutely. Kamikaze pilots died for the Emperor of Japan.
Mm-hmm.
No question about it. The point is, they died sincerely believing that what they were dying for was true. If Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John made up the resurrection of Christ, they knew it was a lie. They would not be willing to die in order to cover up what they knew to be a lie. Study psychology.
What if that lie was a way to manipulate the political atmosphere of the period to make what they believed to be a better future for the world?
Well, the problem is, first of all, they had no political power. Nero was slaughtering them.
And the Bible wasn't a politically powerful document?
In the first, second, and third century, the Bible was trash when it came to power politically.
What about now?
Well, now it's totally different. But I can promise you, the Bible wasn't written in the 20th century. The Bible was written in the first century. The New Testament was written all in the first century, and the followers of Christ were being thrown to the lions. They were being burned on stakes in Nero's gardens to light his gardens. They were being crucified upside down like the Apostle Peter. They were being beheaded like the Apostle Paul by Nero. I can promise you, sir, in the first, second, and third century, followers of Christ had no political power. To study Roman history, it's very clear. It wasn't until Constantine that then Christians began to have some political power because of Constantine's conversion.
And so, in effect, the apostles got what they wanted, and we still have no way to prove whether they got what they wanted through a clever lie or through the truth.
Well, it's a question of what's most reasonable to believe. And obviously, the apostles insisted that honesty is a moral absolute. So what you have is you've got these incredible hypocrites who insist that telling the truth is a moral absolute. They intentionally lie, is your scenario. They intentionally lie, making up the resurrection, and then they're willing to die with no political gain, no financial gain. I mean, why would they be willing to die to cover up the resurrection of Christ if they knew that the resurrection was a lie? What would motivate them?
Nietzsche talked about the fact that a religion is needed for a government that isn't strong enough to basically hold its own. Now, what if they believed that a religion based on good, or what they believe to be good, Judeo-Christian morality, what if they believed that this would be a great thing for the future? Now, would they not perhaps be even willing to die for that?
Sir, it's real simple. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you does not depend upon the resurrection of Christ. You will find do unto others as you would have them do unto you in almost every major world religion. So if these guys were simply into being good, into promoting an ethic, they would never have died to cover up the resurrection of Christ, which they knew to be a lie. They would have instead just stuck to the ethic, a Judeo-Christian ethic. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
But around them, they see people who are not following this ethic. They see the Romans killing other people who do not deserve to die. And yet they think perhaps that we, through a certain clever ploy, can manipulate just about everybody to follow this ethic. And perhaps they didn't believe that it might work. Perhaps it was just a far-fetched idea that did work after several centuries.
So here's the scenario you're painting. Hundreds of people who claim to have seen Christ were lying. They hadn't seen Christ. But in order to put together a religion that they knew would not succeed in their lifetime, but would succeed 2 or 3 or 4 centuries down the road, they were willing to die for it.
Why not?
Why not? Well, just find someone who'll buy into that today. Nobody would buy into that. That is so ludicrous as to be impossible. Who on earth is going to die to cover up what they know to be a lie, realizing that this lie is not going to have any significance in our lifetime, but 300 years from now or 200 years from now, it'll have some impact, maybe. You're going to get someone to die for that? You have got to be kidding me. No one would die for that. Maybe you're talking to different people than I'm talking to. People aren't going to die for much of anything.
You see cults all the time. That cult in Waco, how many people did that have?
Yeah.
Quite a few.
They didn't die to cover up what they knew to be a lie. They died for what they genuinely believed was true, that David Koresh was reliable.
Yes, because they were manipulated by a clever leader.
Yeah, but when you study the resurrection of Christ, this is not some clever linguistic trap that Jesus sets. He's dead on a cross. He dies. He's buried in a tomb. It's a very well-known tomb, the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. So anybody can visit the tomb. And then 3 days later, he's risen from the dead. And over a period of 40 days, he appears to over 500 people who see him risen from the dead. I mean, this is not a linguistic ploy. This is an historical claim.
This is a historical claim that has very little evidence.
How much evidence do you need in order to believe it?
I would like evidence from, I would like more archaeological evidence, basically, which we don't really have. We thought we had found the coffin of Jesus' brother, and that turned out to be nothing really. We don't know enough about this period to say anything definitively.
But the non-Christian.
All right, fine. Then if we don't know enough about anything in this period definitively, then please explain to me the standard that you demand must be met in order for you to know something historically.
You can't know anything historical.
Thank you. Perfect. You're absolutely right. So you have a worldview that you have just succinctly communicated, and I thank you for your honesty. We can know nothing historically. Didn't I hear you say that?
Well, we can infer that Things happened when we have several reliable sources, but when it comes right down to it, we can't really say that anything happened for certain because none of us saw it happen.
Right. I gotcha. So unless you see it happen, it didn't happen.
No, I'm saying that we have to follow Occam's razor here. We have to believe that the simplest explanation is probably going to be true. So if we see evidence of millions of Jews being killed during the Holocaust, we're going to know that this is true. However, if we see 500 people or however many say that Christ rose from the dead 2 millennia ago, and we know nothing about these people's political motivations, we don't have very much archaeological evidence for Christ's actual rising from the dead as a supernatural act, then I really don't see how we can believe that quite as well as we can believe something from 200 or 300 years ago.
Please give me an example of archaeological evidence that Jesus rose from the dead. What are you looking for? How would archaeology support him rising from the dead?
I have no idea. I can't contemplate how somebody can rise from the dead. It's not scientifically possible.
Well, then why on earth are you standing out here saying, unless you can archaeologically show it to me, I can't believe it?
Well, because I know that you can't archaeologically show it to me, so I'm never going to believe it.
Well, is that a little closed-minded?
No, not at all, because I believe in logic and science, and just because somebody tells me that a corpse rose from the dead, I'm not going to believe it, even if 500 people tell me this, because I see no scientific, logical evidence for it.
Okay, would you please prove to me that unless you can prove something scientifically, it's not true?
No, that's impossible to prove, but once again...
Well, then why do you believe that unless someone can scientifically prove something, it's not true? Why do you believe that?
Because it's the simplest explanation. Because
no, it is not.
We don't know anything other than science in this world.
Excuse me, say that again?
We have nothing other than science to support our image of this world.
Really?
Yeah.
What's a scientific date like?
Scientific date?
Yeah. How do you run your family scientifically? How do your mom and dad build a relationship based on science?
Endorphins go up in the brain,
yes.
And people fall in love. They experience positive emotions when they see each other.
Yeah.
And this is due to genetics, because they need to reproduce. They need to create more human beings.
Yeah.
And then they fall out of love. What happens then?
Things change. Brain chemistry changes. Environments change.
And divorce occurs, right?
And divorce occurs.
And that's okay, isn't it?
It's a great thing.
It's a great thing. Are your parents divorced?
Yeah.
And you still stand there and say it's a great thing?
I think it's a wonderful thing, because if two people who can't take care of each other and who don't love each other are together, then they're doing something completely unnatural, and I don't think that that should happen. I don't think that's a positive environment for a child to grow up in.
Okay, I love the way you said it. They cannot love each other anymore. Right? Isn't that what you said? They can't love each other. Mom and dad cannot love each other anymore.
But, if they don't, then they don't. So.
Well, yeah, if they don't, they don't. I will definitely agree with that one. If they don't, they don't. But let's reel it back one. If they can't love each other, then they don't love each other, right? What do you mean when you say a man and a woman cannot love each other? What does that mean?
The environment is not there for them to be in love. They don't have the necessary emotional bond that is created by their neurological brain chemistry.
You bet. Have you ever experienced forgiveness?
Sorry?
Have you ever experienced forgiveness, where you do something wrong against somebody else, And instead of seeking revenge, they freely choose to forgive you.
Yes.
Why did they do that? Their endorphins kicked in, or what happened?
Because they analyzed the situation, perhaps consciously, perhaps subconsciously, and they decided that overall forgiveness would be a better path than holding a grudge.
Well, that implies that they have a rational mind that freely thinks and they can make their own decisions. I thought you were communicating before this that all love is endorphins kicking in and biological urges kicking in and a sex drive and a drive to reproduce kicking in. I thought that's all there is to reality according to your worldview.
That's all there is.
Well, then how can a person freely choose to forgive someone who's cut him off at the knees? How can a man freely choose to forgive his wife who's had an affair? How can a wife freely choose to forgive her husband who's had an affair? How can you forgive if all you are is a batch of chemicals? You're predetermined then. It's just your chemicals, your endorphins, that's all it is.
To an extent, I would agree that you're predetermined. I would say that you have physically no free will. You have electrons that fire randomly, and those are the things that basically cause you to move the way you do, to feel the way you do. And the fact is that once you have enough of those electrons, that turns into an extraordinarily complex machine that, in effect, thinks it has free will.
Exactly. Thank you for your consistency. Now, are you sure you can live out what you just said? Are you sure that if I go up to you and smack you in the face and you ask me, hey, Cliff, why'd you do that? And I said, well, I'm sorry, that's just the way my electrons were firing. I had to do that. Are you going to accept that? Or are you going to say, no, Cliff, I'm sorry. I'm going to hold you responsible for smacking me in the face because I believe you do have a free will. And that's why you and I are going to have a date in court. And you're going to stand there before the judge and you're going to explain why you did what you did. And I'm going to stand before the judge and I'm going to tell him what you did to me. And then the judge is going to say, I'm sorry, Cliff, your alibi that, well, my electrons were just firing a certain way and I just had to smack him, Your Honor. He's going to look me in the face and say, well, you know something? The legal system in this country is based on free will. That yes, you do have electrons, you do have a biochemical makeup, but you also have a free will, and that's why I'm going to hold your body responsible for smacking this gentleman in the face, and that's why you're going to do time, Cliff. What do you think about that?
I think that free will, we're not talking about the same concepts of free will here. I think that the free will that you're talking about is easily explainable through complex physics. Basically, we have the ability to choose whether or not we act upon a certain impulse or not, because we're an extraordinarily complex machine. However, I'm also saying that this is a social construct that we've created as a species in order to survive.
And I'm saying your social construct is impossible for you to live out because you're going to hold me responsible if I steal your money. You're going to look me in the face and say, Cliff, you should not have stolen my money. And when you use the word should, you're appealing to a standard outside of you and me, outside of our culture. If there is no God, there are no objective morals. Morality is relative. Second point, evil exists. Third point, because evil exists, objective morals exist. Fourth point is, before objective morals, because objective morals exist, God exists. The existence of evil, sir, that you are so morally indignant about, that I'm so morally indignant about, clearly points you to the existence of God. Because if there is no God, you're not going to understand what's really good and what's really evil. It's all relative.
Why can evil not be a purely social construct?
Well, if it is, don't get too upset about it. Just realize it's your own personal fantasy, evil.
My question is about. Okay, first of all, I'm not a Christian, but I have seen and experienced a lot of the verse from the Bible, but not too much. So as a pastor, feel free to inform me. So I have a problem with the polarity between the Old Testament, the way the Old Testament seems to discuss God and the relationship with God under that teaching, and then a huge time later we have the New Testament, and it seems to me like the God of the Old Testament changes for the God of the New Testament. And I just wondered how, as a devout Christian, you reconcile that difference, and then that'll lead into another question I have.
Thank you for raising it. I am convinced that both the Old and the New Testament reveal that God is good.
Okay.
Part of that goodness is revealed in his hatred of evil. I think if you're a good person, you're not going to look at a murder and say, oh, let's go to Wendy's. Okay, all right? Confronted by evil, if you're a good person, you want to bring about justice. Evil has to be destroyed. Secondly, part of God's goodness is his mercy, his forgiveness in forgiving people who do evil. You will see this goodness of God revealed in both his justice and his mercy in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. One of the most clear revelations of God's mercy is in the Old Testament book of Hosea. Hosea was a Hebrew prophet married to a woman named Gomer who played the prostitute. Hosea felt like divorcing her. God called Hosea to forgive Gomer. He forgave her and forgave her and forgave her, although she continued to play the prostitute. And God was teaching Hosea through an object lesson, saying, Hosea, do you know the pain that you feel over your wife's sexual unfaithfulness? Well, that's similar to the pain that I feel because human beings who I've created to love me have turned their backs on me and gotten into idolatry. Where's the bloodiest book in the Bible? It's not in the Old Testament. The bloodiest book in the Bible is in the New Testament. Okay. It's the book of Revelation. It talks about what's going to happen when Jesus Christ returns the second time. Okay. So the Bible is horribly consistent. God is good. Part of his goodness is shown in his justice, his judging evil, wiping out evil, and part of his goodness is shown in his mercy, his delight in forgiving.
So the problem I have is that if a human being carried himself through example of the God that's represented in the Bible, I'm afraid that that human being might end up being a tyrant. And so I have a problem with following the example of a God who you can't, because I imagine that the answer is going to involve something about the separation of a mortal being from God. That, there has to be a difference. There's no way that one thing can. But on the other hand, you have to choose that my God is like this, and I need to. So you have to choose the good, loving parts, and then discard. So, for instance, what struck my mind. I remember when I was young, and I heard the story of Abraham being tested. I believe Abraham, right? The test of Abraham is severe. That is severe. It's very difficult to read the test of Abraham and to think that this is God. And then ultimately he's like, oh, I really didn't want it. I was just testing you. Wow, if my parents did that to me, told me to go kill somebody, then stayed my hand and said, oh, you have faith in me, now I know you're loyal, I'm pretty sure that I'd be messed up. And so, no, I don't mean this as a joke. I really mean this in all seriousness, that how do you look to a God who behaves in such a way? And, and I'm willing when having a discourse with a Christian to accept the Bible, not to debate the Bible, to, accept the text in its entirety, because I think that's part of what being a Christian involves. So I've got this, so that would be my question to you, is how do you, because, and then the final question, which I wanted all this discussion to lead up to, is the difficulty it takes to be an intellectual, rational human being, and then to have to hold yourself back with the mysteriousness of God, and then finally, maybe I'll just ask it all, because I've seen you talk like several years, and these are the issues that keep on popping up in my mind. That I've heard you discuss the Bible as a historical text, and you'll go through a litany of of historical observations in the text, and when you present it as such, it sounds like a historical text. That's fine. But now all of a sudden, the frame of mind that somebody reading the Bible's in is, oh, this is history. I'm going to read this historically, and then you hit huge abstractions. Giant abstractions. Abstractions like God sent his son as a man to shed his blood to get rid of all. It's huge. That is a huge, huge, huge abstraction. Every single one of those subjects and those sentences has a weight and then most people's answer to that is accept on faith, move on. Just accept on faith, move on. You don't rationalize it. You don't think about it. You don't put a mechanistic machine as to how that works. You don't even think about it. You just accept it on faith and move on. And it's very difficult for me to think that a Christian has to argue very rationally, okay, we're going to study this with the history and go from point A to point B with these direct causologies. And then when we have to deal with the biggest abstractions, I hear Christians talking all the time, and the first thing they start with is Jesus died on the cross to save you of all sin, or something to that effect, if I'm incorrect. And so my first interaction with a Christian is with the largest abstraction, and yet the basis But it seems like most of them have jumped past the problem with abstraction. Okay, and let's say leap of faith. And I can accept that, leap of faith. That you just leap. But how do you even, if you're going to leap like that, why not just, like, I'm having a difficulty understanding how you choose what to be rational about, where to employ your humanness and try to understand and learn, and then where you just stop, and because, you can't move any farther.
All right, let's talk about the cross first.
Okay.
I'm not standing here saying, believe that Jesus died on the cross for your sins.
Okay. Really?
Just believe. Just believe.
You believe?
Blindly believe. I'm not saying that. Instead, I bent over backwards to take one question at a time and work through it as rationally as I'm able to.
Okay.
All right? Now, let's talk about the cross of Christ, first of all, emotionally. And then we'll talk about it from a perspective of justice.
Okay.
Emotionally. E. Stanley Jones was a missionary to India. He met a Hindu government official. They built a friendship, and E. Stanley Jones began to talk with this Hindu government official about Jesus Christ, his death on the cross.
Okay.
As soon as they started talking about the cross, this Hindu government official was just like you, saying, wait a second, this makes no sense. It's too big an abstraction. It makes no sense. It's too big an abstraction.
Okay.
They dialogued, but it just didn't make any sense.
Okay.
One day, the Hindu government official committed adultery. His conscience convicted him, and he looked into the face of his wife, and he confessed, I have had an affair, I've committed adultery.
Uh-huh.
He watched her break down, weep, sob in front of him.
Uh-huh.
Then he watched her look at him in the face and say, but I want you to know that I forgive you, I love you, and I want to rebuild our marriage.
Okay.
The Hindu government official went back to E. Stanley Jones and said, now I understand the cross of Christ. Now I understand what it's like to see love crucified by sin.
Okay.
Emotionally, he connected with his wife. He began to understand he had really done evil. He had really hurt her. And then instead of lashing out at him and divorcing him, she chose to absorb the hurt, the pain in her life, and to forgive.
Okay, so so I think analogy is powerful. I can agree that, if you can understand an abstraction through analogy, that's probably all you'll understand anything, because everything is abstract in some perspective. So, okay,
So emotionally, this Hindu government official connected with his wife, and then he began to connect with understanding why Christ died on a cross. That's emotionally.
Okay.
Now let's talk about justice. I have a friend who's on the police force in my hometown. If this friend pulls me over because I have broken the speed limit and starts writing a ticket for me, and I look him in the face and say, now wait a second, Fred, I'm your friend. What are you doing giving me a ticket? Can't you be more forgiving? Fred is going to look me in the face and say, Cliff, you got to understand, this is not an issue of friend to friend. This is an issue of a police officer representing the state of Connecticut, and you, a private citizen who have broken the law of the state of Connecticut.
Okay.
Justice in the state of Connecticut, I am responsible to uphold as a sworn police officer. Here is your ticket. God is not just my buddy. God is the judge of the universe. I have sinned. I have done evil. My sin deserves punishment and death and hell. That's what I have earned. God is just. He can't just say, oh, you're my buddy, Cliff. Let's act like it never happened. Boys will be boys. He is the judge of the universe. He upholds justice in the universe. That is why Christ bled and died on a cross, to pay the penalty for my sin, to offer forgiveness. You see, it's the cross of Christ where the justice of God and the forgiveness of God come together. So that's looking at the cross from the perspective of justice. Does that help at all?
Yeah, except for the moment you introduced hell, that's another abstraction, which I didn't even mention before.
Oh, well, that's easy.
Okay.
Let me tell you what hell is. Hell is simply the destruction of evil.
Okay.
And if there is no God, if there is no day of judgment, evil ultimately wins. Because God is good, he cannot allow evil to ultimately win. That's the only reason there's a hell. Because God is good, because evil is real, and because God is good, he cannot allow evil to ultimately win. He has to destroy evil, and that's all hell is, sir. The ultimate destruction of evil.
Okay, that's good. So my next question is about this judgment, because this is a huge problem for non-Christians. Is that despite the fact that Christians are not supposed to judge, oh my God, There's some judgmental Christians out there. So,
Okay, what does Jesus mean, as you understand it, when he says judge not?
well, I think the idea is that God judges, not man, and so there's no reason for man to judge. There's no positive outcome that can happen because you would be playing God. That's my guess.
If I look this woman in the face and say, woman, if you lie to her, that's evil. Is that being judgmental?
No. But if you
Good.
but if you say you will go to hell, if you make direct implications that you have made that judgment in some way and that's not God's place to do, then I think you've stepped the line.
Good.
Most people want to not be judged. So, but the problem is that every so often you get stuck with the idea that you have to accept the abstraction on faith, the giant abstraction, that abstraction. And yet you can, so now all of a sudden you give me some indication on how to realize the abstraction through analogy. Fine. But it is tough to accept the abstraction wholeheartedly as a critical person who you have governed me to be. I mean, it's just tough to just make that leap of faith. And yet Christians many times are resolute that it is that leap of faith. It is that not accepting everything through abstraction, not trusting in the principles through abstraction, but accepting the abstraction. This would be like a physicist saying, I want you to tell me that your scientific law is absolute. And I don't think most physicists would ever say that, because the whole tenet of science is expand, grow, mature, and never take what you know as fundamentally true. It's not. They've been disproven so many times.
But they still flunk you on a test if you get the answer wrong.
That doesn't matter to me. Those are human.
Well, come on.
It doesn't matter to me because
You know very well that all science professors are going to give some of you A's and some of you B's and C's and D's and some of you are going to flunk. Why? Based on whether you answer correctly or incorrectly.
Right.
So to the best of our ability, we seek to do and understand what is real and true. Now, obviously, they're not going to be teaching the same thing in biology class 50 years from now that they're teaching today. Why? Because science is a continual study. You're right, we grow. Nobody understands science totally. And if you think that I believe that I understand God totally, I apologize. I've totally miscommunicated. No. I do not understand God totally. I don't understand Jesus Christ totally. Sir, I don't even understand my wife totally, okay?
Right.
And I don't even understand my children totally, okay? In fact, I have no exhaustive knowledge in any area of life. I just have enough knowledge to keep the pursuit going of learning more and more about my children, my wife, science, Jesus Christ, God. So I'm in a process of learning more and more and more.
Well, what I'm worried about is the idea of joining a religion through fear. And fear doesn't, it seems to me like there's better reasons to...
I agree. There are much better reasons to put your faith in Christ than fear.
All right.
Absolutely.
And yet, it's almost, it's unfortunate is what it seems. So first of all, let me ask you.
I agree. It's unfortunate that it's possible that you're going to flunk out of this university. It's very unfortunate.
Right.
But guys, guess what? It's part of reality. If you just party, and if you don't study, you might flunk out of this place. Now, you've got to learn to deal with that. You've got to learn that fear can be healthy if it motivates you not to run out and play in traffic and get run over by a Mack truck. The thought of getting splattered on the bumper of a Mack truck strikes fear in my heart, so I make sure that I look both ways before I cross the street. In that way, fear is very healthy. And if some of you don't have the intellectual curiosity to study hard for your next exam, and you're simply motivated to study hard for your next exam because you don't want to flunk, you're afraid of flunking, I agree with you, that's not the purest motive, but I'm glad that you're in touch with reality enough to understand if I don't study and if I flunk, I'm not going to be around here much longer if I just keep flunking. So I'm not totally afraid of fear. I'm not afraid of fear if it's the right type of fear that helps me open my eyes to reality and deal with reality.
Okay, so
paranoia is unfortunate.
What about people that just study for the test? I mean, what if? And this is not about the best analogy. Okay, but actually, I think
if you just study for the test because you don't want to flunk, I think it's unfortunate that you don't have a better, higher motive. But guess what? I respect you for being in touch with reality. And reality is, if I want to get a diploma and if I want to progress, I'm going to have to study. So I'll study because I don't want to flunk. I think that is a step of maturity, as opposed to the guy who just wants to party and just flunk. I mean, that's really tragic.
Well, okay, I think that's completely debatable. Okay, but that's okay. I don't want to debate that. I mean, I think it's horrible to study for the test, actually. I think it's reprehensible, and ultimately, I would even say evil, because you have stepped backwards instead of step forward. Not stood in the same place, you have stepped backwards. You have, I mean, it's just, to me, it's just reprehensible. So,
Oh, you got to be kidding me. You think we all pay taxes April 15th because we just love the government and we all want to pay taxes? And just out of the goodness of our heart, we're just going to give the government, the IRS, a tax?
I mean, I don't
Come on, let's be real. Do you think it's wise, because of the fear of sexually transmitted diseases, to watch out how you behave sexually?
No, but there's a contrary.
Fear can be good. You see, the reason I'm driving on this is because Bertrand Russell's big point, the great atheist Bertrand Russell's big point was, you Christians are just motivated by fear. Well, I think if you study Bertrand Russell closely enough, you begin to realize Bertrand Russell was afraid of fear.
Right.
He was scared spitless of fear.
Right.
No. There is a good form of fear. If you have a little child that's not scared about going out and running in traffic, you've got a big problem on your hands as a parent. A big problem.
So
There's a healthy type of fear in life. And I can promise you, if you get cut badly and start bleeding profusely, I hope your fear of dying is going to motivate you to get to the hospital as quickly as you're able to. So there's got to be an ability to get in touch with reality, and part of that is, gosh, I could really get hurt here. That fear motivates me not to go in that direction.
Okay, so I think I reached somewhat of a stopping point. The problem is that most people's interface with the Bible is not through the text. It's not through the
There you go. That is a big problem. You're right. So many of us are willing to study 4 years at this fine university to prepare for at most a 60-year career. But when it comes to reading the Bible for ourselves, we don't want to do our homework. Instead, we want to have some minister or some priest or some Christian do our homework for us. How narrow-minded is that?
All right, well.
If I told you the reason I don't believe in Muhammad is because of them terrorists, I'd be a narrow-minded bigot. When it comes to Muhammad, I better have the open-mindedness to read the Quran and find out, what did Muhammad teach? How did Muhammad live? And then I either accept or reject Muhammad based on who he is, not for how he's been misrepresented by some terrorist.
Okay, so this is why, if I were to become a preacher, I would become the do-it-yourself preacher. Because to me, religion is not the kernel. It's not. To me, religion is the social institution. That if the people that kernel generates are so far removed from the kernel, then that kernel was not a good kernel. It was not a good seed. And
Oh, come on.
I'm sorry, but no. This is.
Go around the world, the Baptist hospitals, the Catholic hospitals. Come on, who abolished slavery in the British Empire and the United States? It was followers of Christ, William Wilberforce, John Newton. What do you think Dr. Martin Luther King was? He was a minister, a Christian minister.
But
There have been millions of followers of Christ over the past 2,000 years. Mother Teresa, Abraham Lincoln. I mean, the list goes on and on.
But don't you think that I could come up with the alternative contradicting the contradiction?
No, that's not the point. The point is you're saying, come on, man, all these Christians are just not, they're just not really compassionate, really open-minded. That's not true. The vast majority of followers of Christ are very kind, compassionate people. Look at the hospitals around the world built by followers of Christ. Now, obviously, there are a bunch of hypocrites who call themselves Christians. We know that.
And are you afraid that they'll ever be the majority? I mean, is that
Well, if they are the majority, that's their decision. They have a free will. But that says nothing about Jesus Christ. It says a lot about those hypocritical Christians.
Well, to me, it says something about the failure of a religion. A little.
I agree. Well, religion is a failure. I hate religion. I'm not out here to talk about religion. I'm out here to talk about a relationship with Christ.
Okay, good. Okay.
Well, saying don't put your faith in Christianity.
Right. Christianity has been used to justify the Crusades, the Inquisition.
Right.
It just goes on and on. I think you'd be an idiot to put your faith in Christianity. Obviously, my African-American brothers and sisters have not put their faith in Christianity. My African-American brothers and sisters have put their faith in Jesus Christ. Christianity has been used to enslave their forefathers and foremothers.